unless it comes out of you or is toilet paper, do not flush it down the toilet. I got into the industry, I was in the beginning of my career, I was traveling across the country aimlessly, working for state parks, maintenance jobs, cleaning bathrooms on the Great American Journey where I was gonna travel all over the place and see a bunch of stuff. And there was a little life hack where I could live in the state parks for pennies on the dollar. So there was the very first park I worked at was in Colorado, and my housing was $25 a month. And I got a room in a very nice house that was overlooking waterfalls. And I thought I was going to work for parks forever. This is amazing. And so as the story went on, I found myself in the Bay Area of California on Angel Island. And there, I learned about water treatment, distribution, and wastewater treatment. And I knew at the time, I'm not college educated, I'm a college dropout, it never really worked for me. And I decided that I needed to specialize in something. I realized that, and I didn't know what it was gonna be, but it was gonna be in some kind of trade. And the chief plant operator at the time on Angel Island became an acquaintance and a coworker, and I was in his office one day, and he had this T2, D2 thing on his wall, and I said, what are those? And he explained to me how he became a water treatment plant operator, and then there was another one hanging on the wall at the wastewater plant. That was the wastewater certification. And I asked him what it took to get there, and he told me, and so I went and I got the Sacramento State University Office Water Programs course, and I fell in love. It was like, it was meant to be. I fell backwards into it, but it was just everything about it, the chemistry, the biology, the corrosion control. I remember being really fascinated with that chapter, and it just became almost, borderline obsessive, where I just everything I get my hands on. And from, I don't know, I was making $10 an hour at the time and working multiple jobs, just trying to make my way through the world, and fast forward the tape a year, and I was a T2, D2 operator, and I got my first water job making a livable wage in South Bay. And I left parks at that point and decided to pursue water treatment at the time, and then eventually wastewater treatment.
So answer this for me. You talked about upskilling. Generalist versus specialist. Talk to me.
You're talking about my upscaling. I would say specialist.
Specialized.
Yeah, specialized.
Okay.
Specialized knowledge. It's I like general knowledge, so I'll like listen to like the Andrew Huberman podcast, and I'll listen to like Cal Newport, like broader things. But I find that the most value is added when I deep dive into something, because that's where, when you like peel the layers back on an onion, that's where I feel like I start to excel and separate myself from the crowd, as it were, is specialized knowledge. But okay. I do like general too. It's interesting to learn new things.
Yeah, that's been an old school of thought. Should I specialize or generalize? And I feel like at first everybody was specializing, and now people are generalizing, or going back and forth. So yeah, makes sense.
I mean, whatever. That's my perspective, and doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just I like the ridiculous detail. Anybody who's known me for any amount of time, like, I realize I'm losing people when the glossy eyes, happen, and I better stop. The point is that I don't know. I guess it's how I'm wired. Is the just ridiculous level of detail. I'm always asking why. Like, I get your general idea. I get what you're trying to say. Yeah. But why? Yeah. Why? Why is it like that? And I've never been able to settle for that. That's why. It's like, no, I gotta know. And so what that has served me very well, especially when it comes to my job and passing certification exams, because when I approach it from a general point of view, it's not enough when you get to higher levels to know that it happens. You need to know why it happens. Yeah. So when you specialize in stuff, it really pays dividends.
Yeah. Do you think that the newer generation is told, or not even new generation, but just those who are operating, not on the supervisor, not on the decision-making level, do you feel like they're told why often enough?
I don't. No. I don't. I think at this point I've had a deep enough sampling, or a representative enough sampling, and it's not a dig on my colleagues at all. great people out there. I feel like it makes me sound a little critical when I say no. I don't think people have been asking why enough, or being told why enough. I have been present in my own training. Not every trainer I've ever had, but where this is how it works. And then when I ask why, well, that's because that's how we do it, and that is never a good answer.
Never.
Ooh, that's a great question. This is a multifaceted position, and you can dive into any one discipline you want. So you can be mechanical, and you can become like a pump and motor person. You can be in electrical. You can go into chemistry. There's people that start as operators and become laboratory technicians, and vice versa. You could be a lab person and become an operator. Biology is another thing. If you're in wastewater treatment, you need to know about biology and some basics of it. But I would say probably the thing that weaves it all together, the one thing, is math. Math is like the perfect rounded skill that I think if you can master the math, you can get the rest of it. So I would really encourage people to learn to love math if you don't love it right now.
All right, you talked about upskilling the math portion. I see you post a lot of content around math.
Yeah.
I wasn't a math genius myself, so why the affinity for not only math and upskilling, but also teaching it to others?
Oh yeah, so I wasn't a math whiz. I actually struggled a little bit with the math when I broke in. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. I think the reason I'm, with the channel I'm focusing on math so much is it seems to be what trips up operators the most when they go to certify. But the other reason why it's so important is in our job, whether you're doing electrical work, the biological side of the treatment process, the chemical side, all of it, most of your problems can be answered with math. Yeah. So a biological problem, you're doing a food to microorganism ratio, or you're doing an MCRT to find out, is your sludge old enough, or you're doing a hydraulic loading rate on your, are you overloading your trickling filter hydraulically? You need to do math for that. Is your pump efficient? You're doing math to find out your efficiencies.
Is there, like with AI or even these super speed calculators, like is there a way to hack math to not have to learn everything but still be successful at running a treatment facility?
Certainly, yeah. But what you need to know is that the exams are built around those things not being available to you. Okay, so I was just talking to somebody the other day over, I think it was over Reddit, who was asking for some math tips or some tips for studying, and they said, wait, is there any sort of hack, exactly like you asked, like when you start getting there? I said, of course, you think engineers are out there like doing long form calculus? No, they put it in a spreadsheet or a pre-built calculator and it does it for you. However, there are times that SCADA goes cattywampus on you, or your calculators aren't accessible to you. You need to you need to be able to work in an environment that those tools aren't readily accessible, and that's how the tests are built. And so, yes and no. You need to be able to do both.
It's one thing to have a super tool, but you got to be able to find that super tool within 1,000 other super tools.
Absolutely. I always tell people, plumbers don't get paid money to put a pipe wrench on a pipe. Plumbers get paid money because they know where to put the pipe wrench in the appropriate place on the pipe. You need to know the correct math equations. It's not just being able to do the math. You need to know when, how, and why you would apply an equation in certain locations.
Okay.
Is there a way like we could sit you on a chair or something like in the middle of the whole ordeal?
Podcasts. Amazing. All the podcasts I can get my hands on. The one that's not there anymore, and I'm sorry to everybody who might go looking for it, Delft University Institute of Technology out of Holland had a whole wastewater treatment series for free, and it was my go-to study material for my grade 4 wastewater cert because it was better than anything I could get my hands on anywhere else. But I search for other people's perspectives, and YouTubes and podcasts is my main focus for continuing education.
It's story time. I need a story from when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
I will never forget this story. This is the story I realized, at the end of this, that there was never going to be something I couldn't get out of. This was when I worked up in Mount Shasta City, and height of the drought. This is 2014, so everything was super dry. There was not a lot of water. Everybody was panicking about how little water we had, and we had a big problem. We were doing a meter install project in town, and one of my staff found a leaky corpse stop on a saddle. And it was not that bad, but I asked him to please try to just tighten it up. We don't want it to break. And it not only broke, it blew up in his face, hit him, knocked him into traffic. Thankfully, he didn't get hit by a car. But he was shook up pretty bad. And now we had a geyser going over power lines, and a bigger problem now presented itself that I couldn't shut this line down without shutting down the town, because it was the main artery. And if I had shut that line down, we were probably going to have to evacuate the high school because of sanitation requirements and fire flows. I was in a real pickle. So we decided to do it live. But in order to do it live, we had to get the Vector truck over it so we could try to create. We couldn't even see what was going on. It was so violent, so much pressure. And a couple of us tried, including myself, and I lost the corpse stop up the boom. The Vector sucked up a couple corpse stops. And finally, I directed some staff to open a hydrant across the street. We'd already shut a couple valves off to try to stop the loop. It wasn't working. And we opened a hydrant across the street, and wide open. And while we're trying to work, the city was under drought restrictions and not wasting water. We were getting on people's cases for water going down their driveways. This old timer is yelling at us across the street about how horrible we are and hypocrites. And we're like, look, man, this isn't going our way. And finally, one of our equipment operators showed up. We called him Animal because when we would chain the tires on the plows and the front loaders for pushing snow, he did it by himself while we all did 2 and 3 people. He was a big guy. And he one-handed threaded that corpse stop back on the saddle. We were able to get the broken piece out, and we were done. And in that moment, I went from, like, am I in over my head, to slowing down. We slid a trench plate over the hole so we could just think for a second. And it was in that moment of thinking that I realized the worst case scenario here is that we lose water and we have, a bit of a PR nightmare, but it's nothing worth panicking over. Let's just let this play out. And even though we had people heckling us and we were losing corpse stops up the boom, it was just a whole snafu. We eventually made our way through. And as I reflected on it after that event was over, I was like, you know what? We did it as a team, and I don't think at this point there's going to be something that I'm going to run into that, so long as I have a solid team around me, we won't be able to figure out. And that has been the case.
Okay, so
Biggest misconceptions. So let's start with what I tell them. One of my favorite things is to say I'm a microbe farmer, and that typically already sets the stage for dismantling preconceived notions. I do tell them I get into some dirty work, it's wastewater treatment, but what I'm really doing is fostering an environment for microbes to do the job for us. And then I explain, how these are all natural processes, and we've just engineered places where it happens faster. A great example of a preconceived notion is a good friend and I were talking about this just a couple years ago, and I was explaining to him what I did, and he was like, I had no idea that was wastewater treatment. They had a wastewater treatment plant not too far, and he thought that they took it and just pumped it full of a bunch of chemicals and then put it in the ocean. And I was like, well, no, there are chemicals that can be involved, but it's primarily a biological process. Chemicals are, depending on what you're doing. But I think it's a misconception that when you hear treatment, that it's just smashing stuff with chemicals and sending it out the door.
All right, Shawn, so you talked about some of the misconceptions about this industry. A lot of people think you're probably covered in poop or in poo or wastewater. You look pretty clean, to me. So what do you say to people who think you're covered in poo all day?
Well, I mean, look around. Like, this is very clean and crisp, some spider webs and stuff, but, we're outside. It's most of my job involves a clipboard and a pen. Okay, I'm checking SCADA. I'm making notes in logs, and I'm making sure things are flowing the way they should. Certainly, we interact with those things. I probably get more chlorine, like liquid chlorine stains, sodium hypochlorite on my clothes than poop. You know, you got PPE for that stuff if you ever do get involved. And you know, we have funny lingo. You will eventually get baptized in the poo. It does happen, but it's not our everyday. Our everyday is typically pretty low key if your plant's running efficiently.
Gotcha. And what do you say to those? Because you think about treatment. I mean, there could be a whole bunch of harsh chemicals that go into treating the water.
Sure.
It gets put out into whether it's waterway, ocean, wherever, and it ends up coming back as drinking water.
Sure.
What do you say to those who think that like there's some crazy chemicals that whales are going to start walking and take over the world?
No, nothing like that. You know, the regulators do a great job making sure, the engineers do a great job. We are monitoring our effluent all the time. The water leaving the plant is under very strict surveillance. So even plants that hit it with harsh chemicals, we don't. We only use sodium hypochlorite and sodium bisulfite. So we chlorinate and we dechlorinate. Everything else before that is physical and biological. It's all bugs doing the job for us, or physical screenings and stuff. Those other plants that would use like a harsher chemical, like a ferric chloride or something like that, their dosing, a lot of those dosings are automated. A lot of them, the people know what they're doing. They're doing jar tests and they're making sure they're getting their optimal dosing. And so there's a lot going on in a plant. We're not just like dumping it in and letting it go. There are, you can sniff out pH ranges. You can look at there's all sorts of tolerances within your effluent discharge requirements. And so we're sampling all the time to make sure that we're within those. And if you are within those, you're fine. We monitor for all sorts of stuff, especially if it's going downstream to a drinking water treatment plant.
Yeah. And how often are you out, like outside these gates, and people see you, they talk to you, you know, you explain to them what they do or what you do. Like, are they like, what are some of their thoughts? Like, what are some of their questions about what's going on here?
Oh, they love it. Okay. They love hearing about what's going on. And for the town of Avila Beach, very few people know we're even here, and it's not a big town.
That's kind of a good thing,
right? It is a good thing. That's where you want to be. It's kind of, you want to be an unsung hero, because if people know about you, you are, in our industry, you're typically not, you don't want that. When people ask, you know, what is that place over there, and I explain what's going on, they're most of the time fascinated by it, and they want to know more about it. And they can see we discharge right off the pier to the ocean, and they know it's a really healthy ecosystem out there. There's no issues from our discharges, and it's people typically are really interested in what's going on over here. They want tours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
I used to work for posting system. Unless it comes out of you or is toilet paper, do not flush it down the toilet. The pumps get jammed, sewers get clogged, and fats, oils, and grease don't come out of you either. It's got to be poop, pee, or toilet paper. The rest of it does not belong down the drain, and we pay the price at the treatment plant and in the collection system when those things do go down the toilet. But a shorter version on a billboard.
The next following question I have. Misconception.
Okay, so I'm going to mention two mentors. Rich Abels, Chief Plant Operator, California State Parks, who took me under his wing and is the reason I'm such a stickler of an operator and don't settle for less than a high standard. I won't say perfect because nobody's perfect. And then Gerald O'Reilly, who was my maintenance chief when I started this journey, who allowed me to pursue, I guess he didn't allow me to pursue it, but he encouraged me to leave his tutelage and go work with Rich. And both of them are still friends. I mean, this was 14 years ago, and without their influence, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And a word of inspiration to other operators is it may be dirty and stinky and awful, but we're doing a very important service. We are one of the fine lines between we are one of the fine lines when it comes to public health. People don't know much about what we do, but if we weren't doing it, there would be a lot of sickness and there would be a lot of health issues. So keep up the good work.
All right, you gave us a word of inspiration. What was it like, or what would you say is the best way for society to get behind water treatment workers, people in public works, to be that first responder, to be that considered essential worker?
For the general public to get behind them?
Yeah.
Education, outreach, getting into the plants and seeing what we do and just normalizing all of it. You know, people think, you know, drinking water treatment, and I think there's a, you know, in a certain subset of our country, people don't. There's a lot of distrust around it, and you know, I don't want that, you know, government issued water and stuff. And it's like, well, you know, there's some really important things that go into water treatment, and I think honestly, I think the industry, in some respects, has failed to earn the public trust, and I think we need to earn it back. And the same with wastewater treatment, is really demystifying what it is we actually do and how important it is.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. All right, so it's March 2020. You know, there's this thing going on the news, stuff coming from China.
Yeah.
It's COVID.
Yeah.
Where were you at? And then kind of what was the initial like marching orders when COVID first hit? And then kind of like what was that new normal coming out of it for you?
Yeah, so it was such a funny time. I was still working with the state up in the Bay Area. I was in a management position and I was still overseeing some of the wastewater and drinking water operations, but it was mostly a broader public works style job. And at first I didn't take it serious. I was like, another thing to be, you know, worked up about. I actually didn't start taking it seriously until my wife, who worked at a hospital, came home and was like, no, you need to take this seriously.
Yeah.
And but for me, I remember thinking in a very naive way, I'm going to get a couple weeks off. This is great. You know, I'm tired.
Work from home.
Yeah, work from home.
Yeah.
And my boss calls me and says, "You're not going to like this. You're an essential worker. You don't get any of that time off." And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then it was this really odd adjustment of staffing, where I saw an opportunity to get some stuff done, to really like, things were gonna really mellow at work. Like it was gonna be less people around, and I could get some stuff actually. Less people were gonna be in the. This was state parks. Less people were gonna be in the parks, and I was like, hey man, like we're gonna fix some stuff. And then we couldn't work within 6 feet of each other, and it was like, it was really difficult. Now a lot of our work was outside, but then people started getting sick, and like. It was hard for me to calibrate, and the state of California took it very seriously, and I don't know. So we adjusted. We fixed our. I actually got out of my castle and started operating more because I had promoted from an operator to a manager, and I was, like I said, I was overseeing multiple things, several different state parks. And I was finding myself getting into the trenches again because people were getting sick, and it was just all the social distancing stuff. I even have a picture on my phone with a colleague and I in my office, and he had his tape measure, and it was out 6 feet. You know, it was just it was kind of a very naive approach to it.
Nobody knew anything.
No, and I kind of got smacked with reality as things really started getting serious. And then in the aftermath, it was I left that job during COVID and I moved to the Central Coast. And I started working for a contract operator, and there it was like a little bit more of the Wild West.
Yeah, like we don't care, we got to get the job done.
Yeah, and who cares about your mask? And it was like, we're not wearing, okay, and then with mask was down here, and it was just like a totally different vibe. And coming out of it, I think the biggest challenge has been the supply chain is still disrupted.
Still.
I mean, a particular fitting I was just trying to get for a big project,
6 months out,
30 weeks out, and I was like, really? This was like 4 years ago, guys. But the supply chains are still all messed up. It really made me appreciate my staff more, because it's like you don't, like, it's not like I didn't appreciate them already, but you don't know what you don't have until you don't, or you don't know what you have until you don't have it. And you know how, I guess, how thinly staffed we actually were. And just, I don't know. There was a lot of lessons from COVID. So that's kind of a very difficult question to ask to answer. But yeah, that would be, I guess, my best answer for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm going to send you to Custom House down right on the water. And it's not just burgers, it's anything you can think of. They've got it. So yeah, that would be where I'd send you. Thanks for watching the podcast. I've also started my own YouTube channel in the last couple months called The Wastewater Enthusiast. It is centered around getting people certified in wastewater treatment. I am a grade 4 wastewater treatment plant operator. I've taken the grades 1 through 4, and I'm in the process of taking my 5 right now and studying for it. And I thought it'd be really cool to get super relatable training from somebody who does it every day in plane operator speak to help people kind of understand the more technical concepts that they struggle with to pass the exam. So I do day in the life videos where we're doing repairs and I loop it into lessons. We do whiteboard segments where I just talk about conceptual information, and I do whiteboard segments where it's just math problems. And I try to weave it all together into kind of a fun narrative, and we keep it light and fun on the channel as well. So check out The Wastewater Enthusiast. I really hope to help people pass their certification exams, and this goes for people not just in California, but I'm really trying to reach out to people in all 50 states. So yeah, thanks for joining me today.